Welcome to Coffee with B. Today we take a closer look at Sri Lanka's economic trajectory against the backdrop of global uncertainty, external shocks, and emerging structural shifts that could define the country's next phase of growth. For this conversation, we have got with us today Professor Rohan Samarajiva, founding chair of Learn Asia. He also serves on the Sri Lanka Archives Advisory Council, chairs Sarvodiffusion, and advises the Advocata Institute. Hi, Dr. Rohan.
Hello.
So before addressing the elephant in the room, that being the current Middle Eastern crisis, let's take a step back to end February. Before the recent escalation, how would you assess Sri Lanka's economic recovery trajectory up to that point?
Well, I personally wasn't that worried about the effects of Ditwa. I mean, the effects of Ditwa are real. There's 46,000 families who don't have a home to go back to and so on.
Yes.
But in terms of the overall economy, my feeling was that we'd be okay. And I think the numbers have now come in, and the last quarter was not problematic,
Yes.
let's say. So, growth was there. Inflation was within range. Reserves had just gone up a little bit, nothing much. We had been repaying our debts. Life was normal. The uncertainty was with regard to the export markets, because that was a global uncertainty. Because somewhere in this period, we had, let's just take the last, say, from January to end of February, that period, I think we had maybe 3 tariff rates or 2 tariff rates and maybe another one, maybe a different one. That is, we were at 20%, and then there was a court ruling which said it's 10%. And then there was a statement by the President of the United States saying that anybody who traded with Iran might be slapped with a 25% additional.
Yes.
And we actually weren't trading with Iran. I mean, as far as I can figure out from the data, it's about 5 million one way and 1.3 million the other way. Because we were doing some tea, but that was a barter deal.
Yes.
Which was trying to get around the what are they called, the sanctions that were on the financial system. So we could move money there, but we were giving them tea to set off some old debts that we had. So things were normal, I would say. Things were on track. Nothing to write home about, no growth movers, just stability as we've had for the last 1.5 to 2 years.
Right. So then moving on to the current crisis, Professor, how do situations like this typically impact the global economy, and how quickly do those effects show up? And also, if you could comment on for how long do you think that the global economy can sustain before any permanent long-term damage?
Well, the issue is, if you see this as ships are stuck in the Gulf of, in the Persian Gulf. There are other ships that want to go in but can't go in. And the reason they can't go in is, as the US Defense Secretary said, people are shooting at ships. Tough to go when people are shooting at ships. Insurance is obviously going to be very high, prohibitively, or there will be no insurance cover.
Yes.
So in a situation like that, if you imagine the problem to be that of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, then you could say, well, at some point, there will be no closure and life will come back to normal. But no, that is not the case. Because the fighting, the missiles, the drones, have already caused certain oil wells, gas facilities, fertilizer factories, lots of those things have been stopped, have been shut down. And once you shut them down, it's not that easy to get them back. In some cases, it's months. And with the Raslafan, which is the big natural gas field facility on the other side, on Qatar side, they're saying years. So that's the disruption. I mean, nothing in the world is permanent. As you can see, they dropped an atomic bomb on Japan, and today Japan is functioning, right?
Yes.
Very
Correct.
well.
Yes.
So it's not permanent, but on the other hand, there's going to be a lag because the damage and the closures, both those.
Right, Doctor. So, and also given Sri Lanka's fiscal constraints, what realistic policy tools are available to cushion external shocks like this? And where do you see the line between support and overextension? For example, if you take the subsidy on the CPC fuel prices versus Sinopec and LIOC.
Well, let's put it this way. We could go back and really torture the data and see whether there are real subsidies. But in my view, our understanding and our commitment to the IMF has been cost-reflective pricing for both petroleum products and for electricity.
Right.
And ever since 2022, early 22, this was one of the preconditions for getting the EFF. We've maintained that, right? So I have heard one of the government ministers saying there's some kind of hit they're taking on the pricing. That may have been just for public consumption. That's why I said one has to go in and look at the data. But more or less, you could say that that it's cost reflective. Yeah. So if it is cost reflective, and again, when you say cost reflective, based on the formula, and the formula, is it backward looking or forward looking? If it is forward looking, yes, the prices might be still too low. But if it is backward looking, that is anchored on what we paid for the imports at a previous time, then maybe not, right? So those kinds of things have to be addressed. We have something called the Public Financial Management Act, which says that only 13% of the GDP can be spent by the government in any given year. So there is a real constraint in terms of what can be done. Now, while everybody's mind is on the fuel queues and the QR code and all that stuff, my mind is more on the food security situation.
Right.
My mind is more on the fertilizer availability. So what we saw in 2021-22 was a sort of rehearsal. That is, the government decided they were not going to do NPK fertilizer, N nitrogen, P phosphorus, K potassium. This is essential for good growth, and if we didn't have it then, because of various reasons, the government stopped that from coming in. Rice production went down by 32%, tea by 18%, and so on. So we know what will happen, right? No need to speculate. Now the question is, I've been pushing on this front quite a bit. So American farmers are affected seriously. People who are growing maize or corn, wheat, and so on, they're affected. That means there will be repercussions when the harvest comes in. That is, those prices will rise,
Yes.
right? So they're either applying fertilizer at high cost or they're switching. So there are reports that people who are growing corn, which if you think about it, corn goes into ethanol, corn goes into chickens, and so on. Corn is not corn. Corn
Yes.
is many other things
Yes.
in the end. So there could be a big impact on the corn market because farmers are switching from corn to soya because that's a nitrogen fixing plant and doesn't require this much of chemical fertilizer.
Yes.
So you can think down the road that Sri Lanka we import wheat flour and things like that. There could be an impact on that. But what I'm more interested in is that do we have the fertilizer for our purposes, our farmers, our food security, rice and things like that, and let's say even tea. So after some pushing, the Director General of the Secretariat, the Fertilizer Secretariat, came on and said, we are okay for Yalla, which is the smaller season, right? About 500,000 hectares. But he says we are okay for Yalla, but I have my information which says that maybe we are not fully okay for Yalla, right? And I think, 10%, 5% we can manage because we do tend to use a little excess fertilizer in this country. But Maha Kanne, which is we need to have the stocks in place by September, that's a problem. Now there we look back into the government subsidies question. Right now the government has allocated in the last budget 36.9 billion Sri Lanka rupees for the fertilizer subsidy. Now this is a substantial amount.
Yes.
There will be pressure on the government to increase the subsidy. If they increase the subsidy, the 13% lid on government expenditures could be affected. If that is affected, we have a problem with we are breaking the law, they'll have to amend the law, and we are in violation of our understandings with the IMF. There'll have to be something done about those two things. But in addition, it will have some negative implications in terms of repaying the debt, which I think everybody should be concerned about.
Yes, correct.
So those are the kinds of issues that we have. But remember, there's other things are going to go up in price. You see, if you go to a supermarket, even as a consumer, you know that things are wrapped in polythene. If you're in industry, you know that all kinds of things are wrapped in polypropylene and various specialized plastic-based wrapping material. All this is affected by the problems in the Persian Gulf. So those things will either go in short supply or they will increase in price. So that is the kind of thing we are talking about with this crisis.
Right. And moving away from geopolitics, with the rapid rise in AI globally, where do you see the biggest economic and societal shifts coming from, and how relevant are those trends for Sri Lanka?
Well, AI is in flux. You must remember, my organization, we've been doing things that could be called AI. We never called it AI. What is called narrow AI, which is basically machine learning, deep learning, that kind of stuff, for the last more than 10 years. What's novel, what all the excitement is about, is this thing called large language models from OpenAI, which is using an enormous amount of data center capacity, with the result that everybody is throwing money at the problem, and there's maybe a data center bubble that is on. Even Sri Lanka is thinking about getting a data center. They have allocated about 1 million US, which is peanuts, which cannot support a data center. India is going hammer and tongs, and they're getting investment. But that is a particular kind of thing, large language models based on sort of the OpenAI model. Now, there are options because this is a very rapidly changing situation. Just to illustrate, OpenAI was riding high, oh my God, we are really in charge. And then comes DeepSeek from China, which uses less computing capacity, was developed in a shorter time, and sort of threw the whole thing into question. And there's possibilities of changes on the software side that will give us better and less demanding of less resource intensive AI or large language models. And then there's the agentic stuff that is the next wave, which is already deployed in bits and pieces here and there. And then on the hardware side, there's always the possibility of quantum computing. And if quantum comes in, all bets are off. You don't.
Yes.
Maybe the data centers will be stranded. But then, just going back to the crisis, even today, Amazon got hit. Even today. So that means that basically all the data centers that were put in the Gulf area are going. Gulf is no longer going to be a data center. I mean, they were major data center providers. It's not going to be that. Everybody's pulling out. Microsoft, Google, AWS. So those are the kind of uncertainties that we are dealing with. Yeah.
And also, Professor, if we were to speak about the norms surrounding work from home, so Sri Lanka still tends to revert to in-office work outside of crisis, like unlike many global markets. So what do you think is holding back sustained remote or hybrid adoption? Like, is it the mindset, the infrastructure, or something else?
It's different organizations have different organizational cultures. So if you're talking about workplaces, when you talk about organization culture, I know there is that old statement about the conversations around the water cooler or the conversations around the coffee machine.
Yes.
That actually make links and connections and result in higher output or better output, right? So that doesn't happen now. I am a person who, my organization has been doing work from home for the last 15 or more than 15 years. We didn't have to wait for COVID.
Yes.
We allowed people to work from home whenever they wanted and so on. We don't have clock-in times. We don't have clock-out times. We don't pay people for the time they spend with us.
Yes.
We just pay them for output. So we have fancy assessment techniques,
Yes.
evaluation techniques,
Yes.
but that's it. But there is still something about meeting face to face, right?
Correct. Yes.
And of focusing attention, right? So it's up to the private sector how to handle this. Government, of course, has a great difficulty because I think what the government does is the government doesn't know how to measure output
Yes.
and
Correct.
reward output. So the only thing they can measure is, are you at work, right?
Yes.
So when you come to that, it's very easy to portray that you're at work when you're remotely connected. You can have your whatever Zoom or Teams or whatever connected, but you can be doing other things, no? So that may be one reason.
Yes, true. So putting, as of last, putting all of these together, like the external shocks, the fiscal constraints, debt repayment, and technological change, what should Sri Lanka be getting right over the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, I didn't, earlier I was talking about the inputs, right? That is the fuel, which is an intermediate product and affects the entirety of the economy. As we can see, fuel prices go up, other things are affected. Fuel shortages will depress. I would think that even the current rationing schemes and closing offices, there's less traffic on the roads now.
Yes.
This is going to bring down the growth rate, maybe by even a percentage, 1%, right? It's just going to do that. That's the way with energy. But we are going to be affected by, I don't think the tourist industry, however optimistic they want to sound, and I think they should try to sound as optimistic as they can, they're going to take a hit. The reason being that jet fuel is rapidly escalating. If you think our fuel price increase has been big, take a look at the jet fuel prices. So that is going up. And there are shortages here and there. So with that, what you're going to get is surcharges on air tickets. And when you take Sri Lanka's markets, our main market is India and maybe Europe, and then it's Russia, Europe, Britain, and so on. For those people, the travel component is a higher part of their tourism spend. than for the people from India. So what I expect is that the Indian market will not be that affected, but the other markets should be affected by this problem. This is leaving aside the fact that the superconnectors are affected because of the war, right? That is, the 3 superconnectors that were doing about 25-26% of all the passengers coming into Sri Lanka. So tourism is going to face some difficulties. I would say that the remittance, now there you have to do scenarios. The remittances are extremely important. We have from a high of 350,000 workers in the UAE, Emirates,
Yes.
to 200,000 plus in Saudi and so on, down to 30,000 in Israel. So there's a lot of people, about 1 million, let's put it that way. I mean, India has got 9 million, we've got about 1 million there. Now, what I really worry about is this actions that are violative of international humanitarian law about attacking the power grid that President Trump mentioned, that he said he will destroy Iran's power infrastructure. And their response, I mean, I think that's a terrible thing for the people of Iran, and it's against law. It's illegal. And I don't know why people are making public statements. It's one thing to hit a power station by accident, but to target it, pre-announce it, and then do it is completely wrong. But Iran's response is what worries me even more. Iran said, you do that, we are going to hit the desalination plants. And the Americans have already hit, Americans or Israelis, I can't remember who, hit a desalination plant in Iran, and Iran's statement was, okay, you have given us a precedent. Because hitting drinking water is also against the law, right? In the same way that you can't hit facilities that are important for the everyday lives of civilians who are not engaged in war. So hitting drinking water is illegal. But the Americans have already done it, right? Now the question is, Iran is saying, okay, we have the precedent and you are going to target our energy infrastructure. We are going to take out the desalination plants. Kuwait's reliance on desalination is over 80%. And it goes down, I think about 60% in the Emirates and so on and so forth, right? So the minute you have that kind of dependence, and if there's any threat to the water supply, obviously they can't support as many people. Guess who are the people who are likely to be asked to leave first? It'll be the expatriate workers, no? Our people.
Yes.
Obviously, that will have problems for their lives, their livelihoods, the remittances that they send back to their families, that then the government uses to convert to dollars, to rupees, buy with rupees, and then use it to pay our loans. So that is going to be another major factor, right? Now again, scenarios. So far, no major attacks on desalination plants. So far, no major movement of people of these workers in the Middle East, so far. Let's hope that that condition remains. There's going to be a lot of human suffering if those conditions are violated.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Rohan, for taking your time to join us today. It is a very meaningful conversation, and we truly appreciate your contribution to our segment.
Okay.
Having said that, we have come to the close of today's episode. I will be back with another insightful personality in my next segment. Until then, take care. Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
One book or movie you always recommend?
I don't know. Well, let's throw a wild card. There's a movie called Wag the Dog, a 90s film. Worth watching.
One place in Sri Lanka you never get tired of visiting?
I guess Kandy. born there. I like going to canteen.
Right.
I just don't like living there.
Okay, but you like to visit.
Visit.
Yes, correct. A hobby you wish you had more time for.
Cooking.
If not this career, what would you have been?
I don't know, opinion writer, writer of non-fiction books.